The year was 2125, and Earth groaned under the weight of its own excess. 8 billion souls crowded coastal megacities, while inland regions struggled with unprecedented droughts. The climate crisis had evolved beyond predictions, with sea levels rising nearly 2 meters above 21st century measurements. Resource depletion had reached critical levels, and humanity's collective anxiety permeated every aspect of society. In the sprawling oceanside metropolis of New Hanoi, Dr. Lin Nguyen stared out her apartment window at the massive seawall protecting the city. The titanium and carbon fiber barrier stood 40 meters tall, its surface adorned with algae farms that helped purify the increasingly acidic waters. Beyond the wall, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, the third typhoon this month. Her communication device chimed. It was a holographic projection of Director Wong from the Gravitational Anomaly Study Organization, GAS for short. "Lin, we need you at headquarters immediately. The Council has finally reviewed our proposal." Lin's heart raced. 6 months of theoretical modeling, countless simulations, and heated debates had led to this moment. She gathered her tablet, data crystals, and lightweight jacket before heading to the vacuum tube transport system that would whisk her to GAS headquarters in minutes. The sleek, curved building of the GAS complex stood in stark contrast to the utilitarian structures surrounding it. Inside, scientists from 37 nations collaborated on humanity's most ambitious projects. Lin's footsteps echoed through the corridor as she approached the main conference room, where 12 figures were already seated around a horseshoe-shaped table. "Dr. Nguyen," said Chairperson Tran, a stern-faced politician who headed the International Joint Council, "please take your seat. We were just discussing the ethical implications of your team's proposal." Lin nodded and sat beside her closest colleague, Dr. Maya Rodriguez, whose dark eyes revealed a mix of anticipation and worry. On her other side sat Colonel Vu, head of security operations for orbital installations, his military posture unchanged even in civilian clothes. "To summarize for those just joining," Chairperson Tran continued, "Dr. Nguyen's team proposes temporarily altering the moon's orbit, or as she clinically phrases it, implementing a controlled lunar displacement to study gravitational anomalies that might lead to breakthrough energy technologies." "With respect, Chairperson," Lin interjected, "this isn't merely about energy. Our simulations suggest we could gain fundamental insights into gravity itself, knowledge that could revolutionize propulsion, resolve our resource crisis, and perhaps even unlock interstellar travel capabilities." Tran's expression hardened. "And in the process, you propose to tamper with the most fundamental relationship in our planet's history, the Earth-Moon system, the system that regulates our tides, stabilizes our axis, and has shaped every living organism's evolution for billions of years. We're not proposing to remove the moon permanently," Maya added, her Spanish accent becoming more pronounced as she grew defensive. "The displacement would be temporary and controlled, with fail-safes at every stage." "And what of the tidal disruptions, the potential seismic activity?" asked Dr. Okafor, the renowned climate scientist. Lin activated her presentation, and a 3-dimensional model of the Earth-Moon system materialized above the table. "We've run over 3,000 simulations. Yes, there will be environmental effects, but they're manageable with our current coastal infrastructure. The seismic activity would be limited to magnitude 5 events, primarily in already active zones. The climate impact would be temporary." "Temporary for whom?" interrupted Tran. "For the coastal communities that might face unprecedented flooding, for marine ecosystems already on the brink of collapse?" The debate continued for hours, with arguments growing increasingly heated. Just as it seemed Tran would call for a vote to reject the proposal, Colonel Vu, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "2 days ago, our radio array in the Atlantic Observatory detected something unusual." His voice was calm but carried authority that silenced the room. "During a routine simulation test of lunar gravitational fluctuations, We recorded gravitational wave patterns that don't match any known model. He nodded to Lin, who pulled up the data. Complex waveforms pulsed above the table, their patterns shifting in ways that made several scientists lean forward in astonishment. These readings suggest there's something about gravity, something fundamental that we don't yet understand, Lin explained. And understanding it could be the key to solving our energy crisis and climate stabilization challenges. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Chairperson Tran spoke, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility. The Council will deliberate privately. But be clear, Dr. Nguyen, if this project moves forward, it will be under the strictest monitoring protocols in scientific history, and you will bear personal responsibility for its success or failure. 2 weeks later, Project Lunar Drift was approved under the public designation Gravitational Anomaly Study. The carefully crafted name was intended to minimize public alarm while technically describing the mission's purpose. The media coverage was measured, with GAS public relations emphasizing the temporary nature of the displacement and the vast scientific knowledge to be gained. Preparation began immediately. Hundreds of engineers were dispatched to the moon, where they spent months installing massive ion propulsion engines at strategic points across the lunar surface. Meanwhile, a network of stabilizing satellites, each equipped with its own propulsion and gravitational sensors, was positioned in a complex grid formation between Earth and the Moon. The Neo-Lunar Station, which would serve as the command center for the operation, was expanded to accommodate the influx of scientists and engineers. Originally designed as a research outpost for lunar geology, the station now housed over 300 personnel, with Lin appointed as mission director. On her first day aboard Neo-Luna, Lin stood at the observation deck, gazing at the Earth hanging like a blue marble in the void. The station's artificial gravity gave a semblance of normalcy, but the knowledge of what they were about to attempt weighed heavily on her. Beautiful, isn't it? Colonel Vu appeared beside her. Hard to believe we're planning to disrupt a relationship that's existed for over 4 billion years. We're not disrupting it, Lin replied. We're temporarily adjusting it to learn from it. Vu smiled wryly. The distinction might be lost on the billions watching from down there. In the months that followed, Neo-Luna became a hive of activity. Engineers worked around the clock, testing and retesting the propulsion systems embedded across the lunar surface. Mathematicians refined orbital calculations to ensure precise control during the displacement. Geologists monitored Earth's tectonic activity, ready to signal an abort if dangerous patterns emerged. Lin found herself caught between technical challenges and personnel conflicts. The stress of the mission was affecting everyone, and her leadership was constantly tested. The stabilization grid in Sector 7 is showing power fluctuations again, Maya reported during one morning briefing. Dark circles under her eyes revealed she had been working through the night. If we don't resolve it before initialization, we could lose control of that entire quadrant during displacement. Divert power from the secondary arrays, Lin ordered. And get me a direct line to the engineering team at Base Copernicus. We need those fluctuations addressed before the next test sequence. As Maya left to execute the orders, Dr. Alexander Petrov, the mission's head physicist, approached with concern etched on his face. The latest simulations show a higher probability of seismic activity in the Pacific Rim, he said, his Russian accent thickening with stress. Not catastrophic, but enough to cause concern for coastal installations. Have you shared this with Earth Command? Yes, but Chairperson Tran is pressuring us to delay the announcement until after tomorrow's global press briefing. Lin frowned. We agreed to full transparency. Send me the data. I'll speak with Tran myself. These conflicts became routine as the launch date approached. Public opinion on Earth was sharply divided. Some hailed the project as humanity's greatest scientific endeavor, while others condemned it as the height of hubris. Protests erupted outside gas facilities worldwide. and several prominent scientists published open letters opposing the mission. 3 days before initialization, a technical sabotage attempt was discovered in the main propulsion control systems. Colonel Vu's security team identified the culprit, a junior engineer who had connections to an extremist environmental group called Earth First. They believe we're committing a crime against nature itself, Vu explained during the emergency security briefing. And they're not alone. Our intelligence suggests more attempts might be planned. Lin gazed at the faces around the table, searching for any sign of hesitation or divided loyalties. I need to know now. Is anyone here harboring doubts about our mission? This is your last chance to voice concerns without repercussion. Silence filled the room, until Maya spoke up. We all have doubts. Lin, we'd be fools not to. But I believe in what we're doing, in what we might discover. The potential benefits outweigh the risks. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and Lin felt a surge of gratitude for her team's commitment. Then let's proceed with final preparations. Double security on all critical systems, and implement the isolation protocol for the primary control center. No communications in or out without direct authorization. The day of initialization arrived with an eerie calm. On Earth, billions watched their screens as news outlets provided continuous coverage. In coastal regions, people had moved to higher ground despite official assurances of safety. Military vessels patrolled the oceans, ready to respond to any emergencies. In Neo-Luna's control center, Lin stood before her team, acutely aware that history would judge them by what happened in the next 24 hours. Today we begin a journey into fundamental physics that could change humanity's future, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Each of you knows your role. Trust your training, trust each other, and remember that we have multiple abort protocols if needed. She turned to the main console and placed her palm on the biometric scanner. Computer, initialize Project Lunar Drift Sequence Alpha. Sequence Alpha initialized, responded the AI system, awaiting secondary authorization. Colonel Vu stepped forward and provided his authorization, followed by Maya and Dr. Petrov. With each confirmation, tension in the room increased. All authorizations confirmed, announced the AI, commencing lunar propulsion system activation in T-10 minutes. The countdown proceeded with methodical precision. At the 5-minute mark, the first anomaly appeared. We're detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations in Quadrant 3, reported the sensor technician, her voice tight with concern. Origin? Lin demanded, moving quickly to the monitoring station. Unknown. The pattern doesn't match our models. Lin studied the readings, her mind racing through possibilities. These look similar to the anomalies we detected from the Atlantic Observatory. Continue monitoring, but proceed with the countdown. At T-30 seconds. A hushed silence fell over the control room. Eyes shifted between monitors and the large viewport that offered a direct view of Earth hanging in the blackness of space. Propulsion systems at full power, Maya reported. Grid stability at 98% within acceptable parameters. T-10 seconds, announced the AI. 9, 8, 7. Lin took a deep breath, aware that she was about to give an order that would alter humanity's relationship with its closest celestial neighbor. 2, 1. Initialization complete. Activate primary thrusters, Lin commanded. Across the lunar surface, hundreds of ion engines fired simultaneously, their blue glow visible even from Earth as a strange aurora dancing across the moon's familiar face. The force was minuscule compared to the moon's mass, but it was precisely calculated and applied at the optimal vectors. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, instruments confirmed that the moon had begun to drift from its orbit. Initial displacement confirmed, Maya announced, unable to keep a note of awe from her voice. Trajectory is within 0.03% of projected path. A brief cheer erupted in the control room, quickly silenced as everyone returned to their tasks with renewed focus. The real challenges were just beginning. 6 hours into the displacement, the first reports of environmental effects reached Neo-Luna. Coastal regions around the world were experiencing unusual tidal patterns, nothing catastrophic, but enough to surprise even with all the preparations. "Jakarta reporting tides 2 meters higher than predicted," said the communications officer. "Sydney has unusual rip currents. San Francisco Bay experiencing rapid tidal shifts." "Within safety parameters?" Lynn asked. "Yes, but only just. The models may have underestimated the localized effects." As the moon continued its controlled drift, more reports flooded in. Minor earthquakes were detected along the Pacific Ring of Fire, and weather patterns showed subtle but measurable changes as oceanic currents adjusted to the altered gravitational pull. 24 hours into the mission, the Neo-Luna team made their first major discovery. The gravitational sensors were detecting waves that behaved unlike anything predicted by standard physics models. "Look at this," Dr. Petrov said excitedly, pointing to a complex waveform on his display. "The gravitational field isn't just weakening with distance according to the inverse square law. It's exhibiting quantum-like properties at certain frequencies." Lynn studied the data, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. This could be evidence for gravitational field quantization, something theorized but never observed. If confirmed, it would revolutionize our understanding of gravity. Petrov agreed. "We might be looking at the key to artificial gravity fields, or even gravity manipulation technology." The excitement of discovery was short-lived. At the 36-hour mark, warning alarms blared throughout the station. "Stabilization grid in Sector 4 is failing," Maya reported urgently. "Power fluctuations are cascading through the system." "Reroute power from non-critical systems," Lynn ordered. "What's causing the fluctuation?" "The gravitational anomalies. They're affecting our equipment in ways we didn't anticipate. The fluctuations appear to be intensifying as the moon moves farther from its original position." Lynn made a rapid calculation. They had planned to move the moon approximately 30,000 kilometers from its original orbit, a significant distance, but still maintaining a stable Earth-Moon system. They were currently at 12,000 kilometers of displacement. "Can we stabilize at current position?" she asked. Maya shook her head. "Not recommended. The transition orbit is inherently unstable. We either need to return to original parameters or continue to our planned destination orbit." "Continue displacement," Lynn decided, "but prepare abort protocols in case the grid deteriorates further." The next 12 hours became a constant battle against cascading technical failures. As the moon approached the halfway point of its planned journey, Earth began experiencing more severe environmental reactions. Seismic activity increased, with several magnitude 5.5 earthquakes reported in Japan, Chile, and New Zealand. Storm systems intensified over the Pacific, and tidal anomalies grew more pronounced. Public anxiety escalated into panic in some regions, fueled by media coverage that emphasized the dangers rather than the scientific achievements. Political pressure mounted on the International Joint Council to order an immediate termination of the experiment. Aboard Neo-Luna, Lynn received a direct communication from Chairperson Tran. "Dr. Nguyen, the Council is convening an emergency session in 3 hours. Many members are calling for immediate mission abort. I need you to provide compelling evidence that the scientific gains justify continued risk." Lynn glanced at the latest data from their gravitational sensors. "We're making unprecedented discoveries about the fundamental nature of gravity. Give me 3 more hours to compile our findings. You have until the Council meeting, but be prepared for termination orders." As the communication ended, Colonel Vu approached with a grave expression. "We have another problem. 3 of our stabilization satellites have gone offline. If we lose 2 more, the entire grid could collapse." Lynn's mind raced through options. "How quickly can we deploy the backup satellites?" 6 hours minimum, and that's assuming ideal conditions. "Begin deployment now. Maya, Work with the engineering team to stabilize the remaining grid nodes. Dr. Petrov, I need all significant findings compiled in 2 hours for the council presentation. As her team dispersed to execute orders, Lynn allowed herself a moment of doubt. Had they been too ambitious? Had her desire to push scientific boundaries clouded her judgment about the risks? She pushed these thoughts aside and focused on the gravitational anomaly data. Among the chaos of system failures and political pressure, they were witnessing something truly revolutionary. The patterns suggested that gravity operated with quantum properties under certain conditions, a discovery that could lead to technologies capable of generating artificial gravity fields or even manipulating space-time itself. 2 hours later, Lynn was preparing her presentation for the council when disaster struck. A massive power surge ripped through Neo-Luna's primary systems, knocking out communications with the stabilization grid. "What happened?" she demanded, rushing to the engineering station where Maya was frantically working to restore systems. The gravitational anomalies intensified suddenly, far beyond our model's predictions. The surge overloaded our main power distribution nodes. Backup systems? Online, but operating at 60% capacity, we've lost direct control of nearly half the propulsion array. Colonel Vu joined them, his usual composure slightly fractured. Earth Command is demanding status updates. Communications are spotty, but the messages we're receiving indicate significant public panic. Lynn made the hardest decision of her career. Initiate Abort Protocol Delta. We need to stabilize the moon's position immediately and prepare for return trajectory. That would mean losing most of our planned observations. Petrov objected. We have no choice. System integrity is compromised, and Earth is experiencing greater environmental impact than anticipated. We can't risk further displacement. As the abort command was transmitted, another wave of gravitational anomalies washed over the station, more powerful than anything they had recorded. Instruments across Neo-Luna flickered and failed, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, causing objects to float momentarily before crashing back down. These aren't just measurement anomalies, Petrov said, staring at the few sensors still functioning. We're detecting actual gravitational waves, powerful ones. They're propagating through the entire solar system. Source? Lynn asked, gripping a console for stability as another wave hit. That's the incredible part. They're emanating from the space between Earth and the Moon. It's as if our displacement has created a gravitational lens effect, focusing and amplifying waves that were always there but too subtle to detect. Despite the chaos, Lynn recognized the magnitude of this discovery. They had inadvertently created conditions that revealed a previously unobservable property of space-time itself. Their scientific breakthrough was overshadowed by the immediate crisis. The abort sequence had initiated, but the lunar propulsion system was responding erratically due to the power fluctuations. We're losing synchronization between engine clusters, Maya reported. If they fire out of sequence, we could send the moon into an unpredictable trajectory. Manual override, Lynn ordered. We'll synchronize engine firing from here. That would require direct neural interface with the system, Maya objected. The computational load? I'm aware of the risks. Prepare the interface. Colonel Vu stepped forward. As security chief, I cannot authorize this. The neural load could cause permanent brain damage. We have no alternative, Lynn countered. And as mission director, this is my responsibility. Before further objections could be raised, she moved to the neural interface station and began the connection sequence. The system, designed for emergency situations, would allow her brain to directly process the vast streams of data needed to synchronize the propulsion engines manually. As the neural filaments established connection, Lynn experienced an initial shock of information overload. Her consciousness expanded across the propulsion network, perceiving each engine cluster as a point of light in a vast, complex constellation. She could feel the gravitational forces as currents flowing between Earth and Moon, disturbed by swirling eddies of anomalous waves. With immense mental effort, She began synchronizing the engine firing sequences, compensating for the fluctuating power levels and gravitational interference. Each adjustment required precise calculations that her augmented mind performed at speeds impossible for conventional computers under these conditions. In the control room, her colleagues watched with a mixture of awe and concern as Lynn remained motionless at the interface, her eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids. Vital signs on the medical monitor fluctuated dangerously. "Her neural activity is approaching critical levels," the medical officer warned. "We need to disconnect her soon." "Not yet," Colonel Vu said. "Look at the propulsion telemetry. It's stabilizing." Across the lunar surface, the scattered engine clusters were gradually returning to synchronized operation. The moon's trajectory, which had begun to wobble dangerously, was smoothing out toward a stable holding pattern. Inside the neural interface, Lynn was making a stunning discovery. The gravitational anomalies weren't random. They followed patterns that resembled mathematical harmonics. By adjusting the propulsion sequence to create a counter-harmonic effect, she could not only stabilize the moon's position but potentially dampen the anomalous waves affecting Earth. With her consciousness still distributed across the system, she implemented this new approach. The results were immediate and dramatic. The gravitational fluctuations began to subside, and the propulsion network achieved a stable equilibrium. After 20 minutes in the interface, far longer than the recommended safety limit, Lynn initiated the disconnection sequence. As the neural filaments retracted, she collapsed into Colonel Vu's arms, physically and mentally exhausted but conscious. "The stabilization. Is it working?" she asked weakly. "Yes," Maya confirmed, studying the telemetry. "The moon is holding at current position, and the gravitational anomalies are subsiding. But we've got another problem. The Council has voted to terminate the mission and return the moon to its original orbit immediately. They don't understand what we've discovered," Lynn said, struggling to sit up. "The harmonics pattern in the gravitational field. It changes everything we thought we knew about gravity. We need to compile the data before beginning return procedures," Dr. Petrov insisted. "This could be the most significant physics discovery of the century." Colonel Vu helped Lynn to a chair. "The Council is not interested in scientific discovery at the moment. They're responding to global panic. Multiple coastal cities have reported flooding, and seismic activity has damaged infrastructure in at least 6 countries. Lynn faced a crucial decision. The responsible action would be to comply with the Council's order and immediately begin returning the moon to its original orbit. But doing so might mean losing the opportunity to fully document and understand the gravitational harmonics she had discovered, knowledge that could potentially solve humanity's energy crisis and enable revolutionary propulsion technologies. "How long would it take to compile and secure the critical data?" she asked Petrov. 4 hours minimum for the essential patterns, longer for comprehensive analysis." "And how soon does the return procedure need to begin to comply with the Council's order?" "They've demanded immediate action," Vu replied. "But from a technical standpoint, we have a stable configuration that could be maintained for up to 12 hours without increasing risks." Lynn made her decision. "We'll inform the Council that technical preparations for return are underway," which is true. "Meanwhile, we'll use 4 hours to document and secure the gravitational harmonics data. Dr. Petrov, assemble your best analysts. Maya, work with engineering to prepare the return trajectory calculations." "And if the Council demands verification of immediate action?" Vu asked. "Tell them we're running essential safety diagnostics before initiating return procedures." It's not a lie. Understanding these harmonics is critical to ensuring a safe return trajectory. The next 4 hours were a whirlwind of activity. While one team prepared for the moon's return journey, Petrov and his physicists worked feverishly to document the gravitational harmonics patterns. Lynn, despite medical advice to rest, joined the analysis, helping to correlate the neural interface data with conventional sensor readings. What they discovered exceeded even their most optimistic expectations. The gravitational harmonics revealed properties that could potentially allow for the creation of localized gravitational fields. Effectively, artificial gravity that didn't require mass or rotation. More importantly, the mathematics suggested that these fields could be configured to create propulsive force. "This is the key to interstellar travel," Petrov said, his voice hushed with awe. "Gravitational propulsion that doesn't require reaction mass. Theoretical efficiency approaching 99.8% of input energy. And potentially a solution to our energy crisis," Lin added. "If we can generate controlled gravitational fields, we could create gravity gradient power systems far more efficient than fusion." As the 4-hour deadline approached, they secured the data across multiple isolated systems, insurance against any attempt to suppress their findings. Only then did Lin give the order to begin the moon's return journey. "Initiate return sequence Alpha," she commanded. "Standard approach vector with harmonic stabilization protocols." The journey back proved less eventful than the outbound trip. With their new understanding of gravitational harmonics, the team was able to adjust the propulsion sequence to minimize anomalous waves. Earth's environmental systems began to stabilize as the moon approached its original orbit. 3 days later, the moon was back in its familiar position. Tidal patterns returned to normal. Seismic activity subsided, and global panic gave way to a mixture of relief and scientific curiosity about what had been achieved. Neo-Luna Station, however, faced an uncertain future. The International Joint Council had launched a formal investigation into the mission, focusing particularly on Lin's decision to delay the return procedure to gather scientific data. "They're looking for a scapegoat," Colonel Vu warned during a private meeting in Lin's quarters. "Chairperson Tran particularly wants your head for defying the immediate return order." "Let them investigate," Lin replied, reviewing the preliminary analysis of their gravitational harmonics data. "What we've discovered will ultimately vindicate any procedural violations, assuming the data reaches the scientific community," Maya pointed out. "There are powerful interests who would prefer to classify everything related to Project Lunar Drift, especially technology with military applications, which is why we implemented the Data Redundancy Protocol," Lin said. "Copies have already been secured with trusted colleagues at research institutions across 5 continents. If anyone attempts to suppress our findings, the information will be released publicly." The investigation proceeded for weeks, with Lin and her key team members subjected to grueling interrogations. Public opinion remained divided. Many blamed them for the environmental disruptions, while others hailed them as visionaries who had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. 6 months after the moon's return to its original orbit, the findings were finally published. The discovery of gravitational harmonics and their potential applications sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Physicists worldwide began replicating their observations using specialized detectors, confirming the fundamental breakthrough. For Lin, personal vindication came in an unexpected form. During a global science conference in Singapore, Chairperson Tran approached her after her keynote presentation. "Your actions were reckless, Dr. Nguyen," he said, his expression stern but somehow less hostile than before. "But I cannot deny the significance of what you discovered." "Sometimes scientific progress requires calculated risks," she replied. "Perhaps. The Council has approved funding for the Harmonic Propulsion Initiative. They want you to lead it, under strict oversight. Of course." Lin allowed herself a small smile. "I wouldn't expect anything less." In the years that followed, the knowledge gained from Project Lunar Drift transformed humanity's relationship with space. Small-scale gravitational harmonics generators proved capable of reducing launch costs by 90%. Orbital habitats became economically viable, relieving population pressure on Earth. Asteroid mining operations expanded rapidly, addressing resource scarcity. A decade after the moon's brief journey, the first interstellar probe equipped with harmonic propulsion departed the solar system, achieving an unprecedented 0.15 C without reaction mass. The age of interstellar exploration had begun. On the 10th anniversary of Project Lunar Drift, Lynn stood once again at the observation deck of Neo-Luna Station, now expanded into a major research hub. Earth hung serenely in the void, its coastlines protected by new harmonic barrier technology that used gravitational fields to mitigate extreme tides and storm surges. Maya joined her, now director of the station's engineering division. Thinking about the old days? Wondering if we would have made the same choice, knowing what we know now? Lynn replied, "You mean moving the moon or delaying its return to gather data?" "Both. We took enormous risks and gained immeasurable rewards," Maya pointed out. "The harmonic propulsion systems have reduced Earth's carbon emissions by 60%. The gravity-based energy grid provides clean power to 3 billion people. We're building the first true starship." Lynn nodded, watching as the familiar cratered face of the moon slid into view. "I sometimes wonder if there are other gravitational secrets still waiting to be discovered, other fundamental forces we barely understand." "There always are," Maya said with conviction. "That's why we keep looking up." In the control center below, a new generation of scientists and engineers worked on projects that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. The gravitational harmonics discovered during Project Lunar Drift had opened doors to understanding that continued to expand human potential. Earth and its moon continued their ancient dance, their relationship momentarily disrupted but ultimately strengthened by humanity's bold experiment. The tides rose and fell as they had for billions of years, but now they did so under the watchful eyes of a civilization that had taken its first true steps toward the stars. As she gazed at the pale blue dot that was humanity's cradle, Lynn reflected on the lesson at the heart of their adventure. Progress required courage, the willingness to disrupt established patterns in search of deeper understanding. Sometimes, to truly grasp the importance of cosmic relationships, one had to be bold enough to temporarily unmake them. The temporary removal of Earth's moon had altered humanity's trajectory forever, pointing it toward the vast cosmos with new tools and renewed purpose. The greatest scientific breakthroughs often came from the most daring questions, and they had dared to ask whether even the most fundamental celestial relationship could teach us something new if briefly reimagined. It had, and humanity would never be the same.